Right, guys, you know the drill, so phones should be off, should be all prepped and ready. You can leave your phone on, Mike.
I better leave it on
Newsroom
just in
microphone.
case. I'll leave it on silent.
We've got Mike Ledwood in from ITV News and Granada, and also present we've got
Georgia,
Please.
Holly,
Kirsty, Zoe,
Cynthia,
Mason.
Linux, German, Alex.
Marvellous.
Apologise if I can't remember all your names.
Not
I've
expected
forgotten
to.
them all,
Granada, ITV News. Could you give us a little bit of background just to put into context?
About Granada?
Yeah.
Okay. Granada is a independent television station, so unlike the BBC, which is funded by the licence fee, so funded by the public, Granada is part of ITV, which is funded by advertising, sponsorship and selling its programmes to other countries and stuff. So programmes like Downton Abbey, a lot of the drama stuff sold abroad, sold to other English-speaking countries. The format of programmes are sold to things like I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here. That will be sold to all different countries, and then they also own the plot of land in Australia where it's filmed, so then they will lease that out to different TV companies, so they get funded that way. So it's all funded independently, none of it's taxpayer money. I work for the News, ITV News, which is a slightly separate company than ITV. I won't go into it too much, it's a little bit complicated, it's just the way money's moved around, budgets are done. So I work mainly for Granada Reports, which is regional news, which you may have, I don't know if you've seen it. Have you all seen it? So it's ITV 6 o'clock, and then there's bulletins through the day. But we all also work for ITN News, so that's the national news. So 90% of what I do is Granada Reports, but we're also a resource of ITN News, so they will take our footage. And they also do Channel 4 News and Channel 5's news, so anything I do could end up on any of those platforms.
Have you ever noticed that when you're watching Channel 4 News? Often people are quite surprised by that. They say it's an ITN production at the end, whereas it's quite different, Channel 4 News as opposed to ITV News. Okay, that's a marvellous introduction. We probably don't want to go into too much detail because they've all got questions that they'll want to ask around that. So, in terms of any questions about ownership and funding and that kind of stuff, has anybody got any questions for Mike? Don't be shy.
So do you get quite a lot of money from selling your TV shows to other countries?
ITV do. What I work in news doesn't make any money at all. It's actually a loss leader for ITV. The reason they do it is because it's part of the public service broadcasting remit. So to get the licence, historically, there used to before we went to digital and satellite, there were 5 channels. So you had BBC One, BBC Two, ITV, Channel 4, and Channel 5. Now all of those were considered terrestrial channels, so you could tune your TV in, and you'd have all those channels as long as you pay for your licence fee. So all of those channels had a public service responsibility, which means they can't just put out X Factor and primetime TV shows. They've got to do stuff to educate the public and inform the public. So the major part of that is news. So you have to have a news output every single day. So in honesty, ITV don't really want to do news because it doesn't make them any money. So the BBC doesn't really matter. They get funded. They'll get the same amount of money from the pot every year. So it's no issue to them.
That's interesting as well, because often we just think of public service broadcasting and commercial. So it's actually still part of their remit. And I imagine it's regional news is another part of their kind of
it's an
remit.
even further offshoot, yeah. So there's people understand ITV understand there's a necessity to do news because the government say they have to do news to keep their licence, and they can see a value in that. Then there's regional news, which is, for Granada, it's the northwest of England. For calendar news, it's sort of Leeds and Yorkshire, centrals like Birmingham, all those sort of different areas. That makes that doesn't cost nearly as much as the national news, but it doesn't have any advertising slots, so they can't make any money off that. And it's just seen historically as a financial drain on ITV. So they didn't, for many, many years, they were trying to sort of pare down regional news. They wanted to get rid of it. They wanted to move it onto the internet. They wanted to move it to 5 minutes rather than the half-hour programme. But then Adam Crozier, who's the chief executive now, came in and recognised that one of the few things that ITV has is regional identities. So you think of Sky One, it's just one channel. It's just all, you know, it doesn't, it's very generic, yeah. Same with Channel 4, same with Channel 5, where historically, from the 50s, people from the northwest identified with Granada, people from the Midlands identified with Central, people from Southampton with Meridian. So it kind of had something supposedly special that other stations didn't have, and they wanted to, and the new chief executive came in, he wanted to tap into that and concentrate on regional news and put money back into it. But because it doesn't make money, every year we face financial cuts. So I've been at Granada now for 10 years, and every 3 years there's redundancies, there's cuts in staff, there's
cuts to budgets.
Yeah, cuts to budgets. Yeah. So you have to make the same half-hour programme with less money, less people, and less resources. So it becomes a bit of a challenge.
That's interesting, very interesting. That debate's still sort of going on as well, isn't it, in terms of the government, Conservative government is still quite keen on making regional kind of news kind of maybe going onto the internet, so it's not kind of a drain on commercial companies.
Because commercial companies, particularly when we went to digital, so there's now no longer just terrestrial, there's no longer just 5 channels. You've got at least, 60 channels, even if you don't have cable or satellite. So ITV said, well, why do we have to still put millions of pounds into making the news every year? And why do we have to put millions of pounds into making regional news?
When the competitors don't.
When the competitors don't, yeah. And one of the main arguments was, if you go on your electric programme guide and you go to the first page, you've got BBC One, BBC Two, and then ITV, as the way it used to be on your television. The reason ITV is still at number 3 is because they commit to putting money back into, or commit to putting money into news and regional news. If they hadn't, the government would have said, well, it's just another channel.
You can go to channel 47,
yeah, exactly.
Because you're not meeting any kind of public service remit.
Yeah, so to stay in that prestigious slot,
yeah,
they had to commit to regional and national news.
Okay, brilliant. Any more questions around ownership at all? Holly, you look like you're about to.
Don't be shy.
Yeah, don't be shy. I mean, no, that's fine. I think we've covered ownership in quite a lot of detail, and I've learned quite a few things that I didn't know as well. So that was very good. Job roles in TV and film industry. So we're talking about technical, creative, working patterns, all of that kind of stuff. So any questions for Mike regarding that?
What is your job role with Granada?
Well, I'm a cameraman, obviously, so I'm in charge of the way anything audio and visual looks on the programme. What I actually do is, have you seen Granada Reports? So it's Tony and Lucy in the studio, they introduce different news items. So we don't do anything, there's 5 staff cameramen, we don't do anything in the actual studio. That's all robotic cameras now, so that's controlled by the gallery. What we do is we do all the stories that they link to. So if they go to a story about City versus Barcelona, any of the stuff that's shot there, one of us will have shot that. If they do a story about a murder in Northwich, one of us will have come to Northwich, shot a story about that. If they go to a live link outside of a court for a court case, we'll be outside the court filming that, and also I'll operate the satellite truck. So we have a satellite truck that, so you know what I mean by the live links and stuff, yeah. So I would do either the camera on it or the truck on it. So there's 4 of us that operate the satellite truck and go through a cycle doing that.
So there's 3 different things that Mike's effectively doing there. So you might be doing pre-recorded stuff, where you're kind of building a short narrative, a story about a particular issue or an event that's happened. It might be lives, where they're going live to the presenter to get instant reaction or instant updates on what's happening. And on either of those 2 things, he might also be operating the satellite truck, which is basically queuing up the satellite, sending the feed, sending the material to the studio. And it's much more technical than that.
Well,
a lot of it is automated.
Yeah,
now,
exactly. Yeah.
But that's also interesting what you're saying about the robotic cameras in the studio.
Yeah.
Because I still thought that you would have operators in there. I know BBC News, National News doesn't, it's all robotic. But so in the gallery, which we're hopefully going to have, we're going to have a gallery hopefully by next year. We put the proposal in, it's all gone through. We won't have robotic control over the cameras in our gallery because it's costing about £5,000. However, I still thought Regional News would have had operators on their cameras in the studio, but the movement, the lens size, the zooms, all controlled from the
Well,
gallery.
News used to do that though to save money because they wouldn't have to pay people to work
That's
on
it.
cameras. They just
Yeah,
have electric.
That is it,
essentially, I mean,
Yeah.
probably a bigger investment initially to buy the kit, but then you're saving on the operators.
That's pretty much why they did it. In the long run, they'll save thousands.
What do you think about robotic cameras on location, putting together short stories, narratives? Do you think they're going to replace Mike with robotic cameras?
Not possible.
Bit harder to do, isn't it? We're a little bit further away, so hopefully our jobs are still safe for a while yet.
Fingers crossed.
So, you were talking about financial cuts earlier.
Yeah.
How were you affected by it? So did you have to pick up new skills because there's a shorter amount of staff?
Yeah, there's a lot more multi-skilling that goes on in news, particularly the journalists. Journalists now will edit their own stuff. Obviously, they'll research and produce their own stuff. They'll go on site and do all the questions. But even now, they might even shoot their own stuff. So we have what we call a mixed economy. So we have 5 staff cameramen, and there must be maybe 20 journalists, and probably of them, 15 of them are trained to use smaller cameras to do the simpler things. So maybe just a talking head interview. Yeah, the more complicated stuff we'll come and do, but it's in theory, because we've lost so many cameramen through the years, we've had to spread the camera duties amongst other people.
So they're called VJs, video
Yeah.
journalists. So they'll have some training. They'll be using cameras similar to the cameras that you guys use. Now, this is really useful to look out for when you're watching things like Regional News. In fact, don't watch Granada tonight. Don't watch Mike's stuff
thanks
tonight.
very much. Yeah.
Watch BBC News, because BBC Regional News use lots of video journalists, okay? And compare that to a story that maybe Mike's worked on for Granada. Now you can see a stark difference between the production values, the quality of the camera work, the lighting, shot by BBC Regional News, which is predominantly shot by video journalists, and craft cameramen like Mike. The production values on Granada's stuff are way up there. You know, the lighting looks nice, the colours look accurate, it's in focus. Watch BBC Regional News and you'll often see interviews with family members of some poor person who's died, and they'll be sat on a sofa with the curtains closed so that they don't have to worry about white balance and things like that. Okay, so it's worthwhile watching the two in parallel. Any other questions about job roles, working patterns, all of those sorts of things?
How did you start, getting to working in-house?
How did I get into being a cameraman? Well, initially I did a media studies course at university. I didn't really know what I wanted to do coming out of college, but I knew I liked sort of TV and media and stuff like that. And then for one of the modules we did like a television production course, and that was tied up with like a local cable company, so it's a very small company, and they provided us with a kit and a little bit of training and all that sort of stuff. And we had to break into groups and take roles, and there was like a producer, director, researcher, presenter maybe, and the cameraman role. So I took the cameraman role because I like messing about with cameras, and I always liked sort of photography and stuff. And I sort of got the bug from that. And then from that I went and did bits and pieces for the cable company that were tied up to the training module. And then you just, really from there, you just had to get experience. I did a lot of work experience with cameramen, just whatever I could. And then there was a job at MUTV, Man United TV, and they wanted people, because they were setting up their own channel, didn't have a lot of money, so they wanted cheap people with just enough experience that they could train them up to do what they wanted to do, but not so inexperienced that they were starting from the ground level with them. So I got some training with them, did 5 years with them, and then they were part owned by Granada, so moving to Granada was sort of a straightforward step from there. But really, to get into it, you have to get some experience, which is difficult because you've got to get your hands on the cameras in the first place. So
Very interesting. Any other questions around Mike's day?
You were talking about you have to go on site and put together a story and whatnot.
Yeah.
How do you approach, say, sensitive subjects, say, like a family has
Right.
husband and others?
Sensitively is probably the best answer. Yeah. I kind of see like 50% of my job is knowing how that works, the technical side of it, knowing how to compose a good shot or how to light things. I think the other 50% is your interpersonal skills, because you're doing that sort of scenario that you suggested all the time. You go into people who've lost members of the family, you're knocking on the doors of people that don't want to talk to you, and you have to, sometimes you're giving short shrift and send away, but sometimes you're trying to turn them around to do an interview. You're intruding on their lives a little bit. News stories are all about people, so it may just seem like a broad story, but you know it's about someone's life, and you're intruding in these people's lives. So you have to be aware of that, and you have to be sensitive to that.
Do you find that that you're actually having to do that on occasion? So it's not always the journalist that is approaching somebody. Are you sometimes asked to do that as a cameraman as well?
To door knock people and stuff.
Yeah.
It tends to be the journalists. They'll kind of lead that, but you know you can't just go bundling into someone's house and just be calling the shots and saying I want you here and all that. You have to be sensitive to these sorts of things. Even a non-sensitive story. Often you're being invited into someone's house or to someone's office, so you have to sort of gauge the situation. You have to sort of be aware of the sensitivities of that.
It's really interesting.
So what sort of skills do you need to be a camera operator or to operate the satellite?
Technical skills. Well, I mean, they're technical skills that you can train and learn. I always think there's two types of cameramen. There's very solid technical cameramen, and the BBC have a lot of them, where they could take that apart and put it back together in front of you, and they know what every little chip does and on what every little button. Well, I know what every button does, but every little part of it is. I couldn't do that. I'm not an engineer. We have engineers for that sort of stuff. I know how to operate the camera. I know what it all does, and I know the theory of it all. But I'm not an engineer. I see myself more as a craft cameraman, which is, I'm interested in the composition. I'm interested in telling the story artistically, creatively, making it look nice. Really. Where some cameramen don't necessarily have that eye, but they'll be very good technically, but they won't really have that creative aspect. And I think that's sort of a definite separation between the two. I think it's difficult. You can always teach someone how to use the technical parts of it. You can teach them what the buttons are and all that sort of element. Not everyone you can teach how to have a good eye, how to have good composition.
Sound familiar?
Yeah. So would
I
you
said
say-
Have you done
exactly the
this?
same. Well,
Right.
no, just when they interviewed me before we had external people come in
Yeah.
as a practice,
Yeah.
I said very similar in terms of I think you get technical cameramen, I think you get creative cameramen.
Yeah.
There's generally a bias towards one or the other.
Yeah.
So would you say communication skills is a key one, especially when you're doing like live links
Yeah.
and talking to people?
Yeah, well, anything really. I mean, every day I'll get a different. To tell you, to explain what I do as a typical day. One thing that's interesting. Come on, what you say?
I'm interested. I'm also
Yeah.
interested in what your kind of typical day is. What time do you start? Does it start with a meeting? Then are you sent out? There were some questions that you guys I know had on that theme, and that's interesting for us to find out about
Yeah.
as well.
Well, so I work shifts. So the earliest I'll start is 8 o'clock in the morning. The latest I'll start is 10:30, and everything is sort of focused on the 6 o'clock programme. That's the main bread and butter of it. We've got like a half-hour programme at 6 o'clock every night. We do have bulletins in the morning, and we have a lunchtime bulletin and a 10:30 bulletin after the 10 o'clock news in the evening. Now they're only 3 or 4 minutes long, so the heart of it is this 30-minute programme. So everything leads up to 6 o'clock, Monday to Friday. So don't do many weekends, which is nice. The day will start with a production meeting with all the editorial staff. So the journalists and the news editors and the producers, they'll all meet and they'll decide what stories they want to cover on the day. And what's different, I mean, it's quite obvious, but what's different for news than all the other broadcasts is it's completely immediate. You'll start in the morning, and whatever you shoot and research and edit will go out at 6 o'clock that night. So it's a very short window to get everything done. Whereas with drama or studio work, all that sort of stuff, there'll be weeks to prepare for it. It could be days, weeks to shoot it, days, weeks, months to edit it, and then it'll go out in a time slot. We start in the morning and we finish at 6:30 when the programme ends. So everything is sort of built around that. So there's an element of compromise. You've just got to crack on and get on with it. But I mean, that's kind of what I enjoy about it in a way. It's that you're going into a new situation every day. You don't know what it is. I'll be handed an assign. What we're given is an assign. So I'll get emailed an assign which says, you're with this journalist, you're going to this location, this is the job, and it'll be a very brief outline of what the job is. And that could be a hard news story, which could be a crime story, or a medical story about a cancer cure or something. It could be an entertainment story with a celebrity, it could be a sports story, it could be anything. I won't know until I'm given that sign. Then I'll go off and meet the journalist, we'll have a brief chat, and you're straight into it. And you don't have a lot of time, you've got hours to shoot it. It's got to go back, it's got to be edited. So you can sort of appreciate how quickly you have to work, and
The pressure involved.
yeah, so there's a lot of time pressure, which is part of the fun of it really. You've got to be creative, you've got to be able to improvise. You know, you don't know what you're going into as a situation, and you've got to come back with all the elements of a news piece, which could be 2.5 minutes long, which doesn't sound very long, but when you think, if you watch a 2.5 minute news item and you see how many edit points there are, how many different shots, you've got to do all that in the space of an hour or two.
They know. They've done a 3-minute documentary. They know how hard it is.
Right, so how long did you have to do your 3-minute documentary?
2 weeks.
Right, so I'll do something equivalent to that in 3 hours. So you can understand.
And there weren't
constraints.
nearly as many cuts in your documentary as there are in one of Granada's
Right.
news features. So yeah. Mason, you had a question, I think it was you, I'm not entirely sure, about editorial, so the production meeting and editorial decisions.
That was me.
Sorry, Cynthia.
Thought you wanted to.
What is that?
Oh,
Yeah.
It was just basically, do you have any decisions when it comes to picking out the stories? So do you get to pick what you would think would be interesting to the viewer?
Not really, no. To be honest, that's all the editorial side of it. That's their decisions, the producers' decisions. And you can make suggestions. If I've seen a story that they might be of interest to them, I could put it to them, and they might say, great, go out with a journalist and do it. But generally, it's, here's what you're doing, go and do it.
You say that, but you have managed to go into the Champions League final and things like that. So you have managed to get yourself
Oh yeah,
on
I'm trying.
specific
Yeah.
stories that you'd like to cover.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't have a say in what stories we do,
Yeah.
but I'll try and get a say on getting on the stories we are
Yeah.
doing if I'm interested.
So as a United fan, going to the Champions League full work, Champions League final full work is a nice little.
Yeah, some nice gigs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Any other questions at all on the themes of legal ethical obligations? I'm thinking about things
If-
maybe like.
If
Go
there
on,
was
Reece.
like a big headline and it was like dangerous, say a riot or something, would that matter, or would you have to get someone else in to do it, or
Do you mean I've been in riots? If that's what you mean.
like
Film.
if you had to film a riot, would there be? I can't explain what I'm trying to say.
Do we do it? Do you mean?
Yeah, so
Health and safety, general. You know what? Absolutely, it's a good question, Reece. It's a really good question.
Yeah, we have like a security firm that we'll use. So sometimes you'll just have a guy watching your back, but it's generally those stories that the newsroom wants to cover. There is definitely an element of health and safety, and every job in theory is risk assessed. Now the reality of it is there isn't really time to do that. So you're doing what's called a dynamic risk assessment. So when I get to a job, if I think something's dangerous, but regardless of if it's a riot, if they want me to climb up a ladder that's, you know, precarious, or go on a building that I think is going to collapse, it's for me then to decide whether that's a good idea or not. And I've the responsibility to say yes or no to that. But obviously, some things you just, you know, are innately risky, and you have to do it anyway, like a riot. something like that. So you try and minimise the danger to yourself. So we have training in those sorts of situations.
Is that
Um,
hostile environment?
Yeah, hostile
training?
environment training, and you'll have security staff to keep an eye on you to try and protect you, and you'll try and do the smart things, but sometimes it's dangerous.
I mean, there was the Manchester riots not that long ago,
Yeah.
wasn't there? And there was a cameraman from Granada. Was he Granada or freelance that had his car?
Yeah, he worked for us. He was a freelancer who parked his car too close to where the riots were, and they set his car alight. And he was a freelancer, so he had all his kit in it that he owned, his car, and he had months and months battling to get money from the insurance. So you have to do things smartly. You position yourself as much as you can in a safe area, but also you're trying to get the shot as well. So
Striking that balance.
yeah,
between
yeah, and it's, you know, you fall on the right side of the line or the wrong side of the line sometimes, and just hope you come back in one piece.
So Del told us you worked at MMUTV.
Yeah.
MUTV, yeah.
Yeah, MUTV. The sort of what are the differences in the contracts for Granada News and MUT?
How do you mean? Sorry.
So for MUTV, do you need to sign like what's the word? Confidentiality contracts to keep celebrities from.
With the players, you mean? It was we never did anything like that. We never had to do that. It was even though it's an in-house TV company, it's very much an us and them sort of attitude from the players. I went in as a United fan, as a 22-year-old lad, thinking this is great. I'm going to be mates with all the players. I'm going to go in there and film them. We're all going to go out for drinks and stuff. But it's not like that. There is a division, and I think with something like MUTV, it's actually quite interesting because they're less inclined to report on the tricky stuff. So it's kind of seen as a propaganda tool, MUTV. It's all very positive about United, and they will touch on, you know, on a season like this season where they're doing very badly, they'll have to discuss that they're doing badly, but they'll be a lot more cautious about upsetting the club. Because if Granada upset the club might say, right, you're banned, you can't come in. Well, that makes up a very small part of our programme covering United. Whereas if you're MUTV and you're told you can't come in by the club, well, you take the stuff, don't you? Because I think they're 6 hours a day entirely of United. So they're a lot more cautious.
That's interesting that it was still seen as a mem in terms of you're journalists, you're TV,
Yeah, they're very
we're
suspicious.
players, so we're still going to be quite guarded about that.
Yeah.
Because I was thinking, well, if you're kind of privy to inside information on players, would MUTV kind of say, look, you've got to sign a confidentiality agreement? Because I used to have to do that if I was doing BBC drama, you know, if like the lead actor was going out and getting ruined every night, that we wouldn't go and tell the papers that actually they've got a drink problem.
Right. As far as I'm aware, I don't think that was in my contract, but
you're 22 years old and
Yeah,
quite happy to just be.
I just signed anything.
Yeah.
So,
That's fascinating. Really, really fascinating. Any other questions on kind of understanding legal, ethical obligations? I think we've covered quite a lot there, haven't we? Which takes us on to understanding developing technologies, which is a smaller section, but there might be some questions around technology.
How has the equipment that you work with changed since like you started in the industry?
quite a bit, really. I mean, size-wise, they're still the same, and they're still as heavy. And people always go, "Why have they not got smaller?" And obviously, you can get smaller broadcast cameras, and I think you'll be using smaller cameras, but processing power of them is not as strong, so the quality isn't quite as strong. But the format we shoot on is completely changed. So we used to shoot on tape, and now we shoot. Now we shoot on S/S cards, which these tiny little things. You can have a look at that. And so nothing actually gets recorded on it anymore. It's all computer files now. So where it used to be a solid state tape that actually had, you know, it was there on the tape like film used to be. Now it's just theoretical computer files. But it's a lot. You can touch it if you want. You don't have to. You can't break it. Now you can do a lot more with it. So before, if you wanted to review stuff on a tape, you'd have to fast forward and find it. Now, because they're individual files, you can just go to files. You can take that file out and delete it. You can copy it over to stuff which you couldn't do with tape before. And the reason we've gone to that is because we've gone HD to high definition. So we were standard definition, and you need to have, I don't know, I mean, how you need to be able to store a lot more information in HD, don't you, really? That's essentially
it's a lot
what
more
it is.
data intensive, isn't it? But I mean, it sounds like a trivial thing that you can just, you know, you guys are obviously used to all of this. You've grown up with this, with similar technology. So it sounds like a trivial thing that you can just jump to a particular clip. If you're dealing with something like news, or like when I do sport a lot, when you're feeding stuff down the line and you've only just made it to where you're feeding it down the line and the gallery is screaming for the pictures, and you can quickly, within seconds, find the exact point you want to play it down to them, that is massively helpful.
Yeah.
Rather than having a 60-minute tape and pressing like you would on an old video recorder, which we haven't got anymore because they're old. Fast forward again, rewind, looking for time codes that you might have scribbled on the back of a piece of paper. You know, it just makes your life so much easier.
This tiny little thing has just made my life so much easier. You couldn't really understand it unless you'd gone from doing years on tape to this. It's just made, because news, you've got so little time. You're compromising with things all the time. You're getting the best shots you can sometimes rather than the absolute best shot. So anything that the industry, anything technically that can make your life easier and quicker and more flexible makes the job that bit easier. And shooting on with computer files rather than tape has had a massive effect on that. But it's kind of, and all the technology is kind of set up for that. It's to make the job quicker and more flexible and more reliable. So we've gone. When you would go abroad, you would feed stuff back through different television stations through satellites. So you would have to pay thousands of pounds for a 10-minute line feed, which is going to a TV station, say, right, we want to send this from America back to Granada. So and then you would send it that way. It costs thousands of pounds. Now you can do all that on the internet. So you can ingest everything into a laptop and just send it through FTP sites. So they say thousands of pounds. You don't have to go to some foreign news channel where sometimes they don't even speak English, and you're trying to have a conversation to say, our line feeds up, they can't see any of these pictures, it's costing thousands of pounds, and you know our minutes is getting shorter and shorter, and we haven't sent anything. So all those issues are gone now.
I still get it with Al Jazeera now, where I'll have somebody screaming down my earpiece in Arabic, and I'm just going, well, I don't know what you're saying.
Exactly.
I just don't know what you're saying.
And everyone's feeling the pressure, and all of that's gone now because you can do everything over the internet essentially. We do all sorts of feeds just through like 3G and 4G connections. We'll have little mini hotspots that will tether to our laptop and just send back footage. And we'll do that in the region as well. If you're up in Lancaster and it's 5 o'clock and it's got to go on air at 6, you'll ingest it and send it back on the laptop. So you're not always taking stuff physically back to the office.
An FTP site's a file
transfer. I don't know what the P is.
I'm going to say protocol, but I don't know what it is. But basically, it's a way of just sending huge files up into the cloud or wherever.
Yeah, it's all,
and then
doesn't
it
exist.
Come down, come down into the studio. So again, massively changing the way that things like news and sport works.
Yeah.
That is absolutely brilliant. I think we've covered loads there, haven't we? I'm really conscious of the fact of your time. We're on 11:15, so I don't know how much more time you've got. Right. They've not run yet. Yeah. You've probably got no signal.
Yeah. Lucky me. Okay.
So, what should we? I mean, basically, we can have a quick look around the kit. We can have a quick look at some of the.
You want to have a look at the kit?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I'd like us to get a picture outside with Mike and all the kit in front of the building. Some interesting questions there, guys.